Since the beginning of the pandemic, how much more awake are people to the fact that they're being lied to? If you keep being passive, you will be a farm animal. You'll have digital ID, you'll have forced vaccinations, and you'll be just simply a pig in a corporate farm. Every day that we wait, it gets harder to be proactive because they get away with more and more stuff. The pain teacher shows up in our lives. If we're not living true to our heart, or we're not taking care of our body, or not taking care of the planet, pain turns out to be the great quickener of consciousness.
How do we actually find our way home back to that point of well-being, of flourishing?
We have to wake up, clean up, grow up, and show up.
For over 4 decades, Paul Chek has been a trailblazer in the world of holistic health, human potential, and personal transformation. Through his work at the Chek Institute, he's guided thousands of people, from elite athletes to everyday seekers, to heal their bodies, reclaim their energy, and live in alignment with the deeper truth. But in today's conversation, we take a different track. We explore what it truly means to wake up, to face the pain, and to turn it into power. This is the foundation of Paul's latest work in what he calls the Spirit Gym, a concept that reframes life's challenges as sacred opportunities for growth. And this isn't a conversation for the faint-hearted. You'll hear spiritual ideas, mythic metaphors, and bold stream of consciousness truth-telling, all woven from a life of deep inner work. But if you felt the world shifting, if you're searching for meaning beyond the chaos, then Paul brings together a set of perspectives you're unlikely to hear anywhere else. Because as Paul says within this interview, pain is the great quickener of consciousness, but only if we're willing to listen. So buckle up. Let's get into it.
Paul, delighted to be with you here on the Astin-Gregory podcast. We invited you here because we wanted to learn about how we can optimize our health, well-being, our quality of life in these unique, challenging times, and find ways to kind of punctuate some of the madness that we're witnessing unfold. So I want to start by just, Paul, asking you, what's your interpretation of what's happening in the world right now, and how can we begin to navigate this?
If you study the history of humanity in the world, it's just one event like this after another. So I don't think anything that's going on in the world is really shocking or new. It's just the problem is that the dark forces have much more advanced technology than they did 2,000 years ago. Emperors of China have had a long history and habit of going out and seeking the highest, most highly regarded spiritual masters, bringing them in, having them train their officials, and then using spiritual teachings or religious teachings. Then what they do is they use the teachings against the people to make them think that they're free, but to basically corral them and control their minds. And the same could be said of the Bible. All the religious systems are all full of histories of wars and battles and gods controlling people, and you're going to burn in hell if you don't do this or that, or wear, how you can dress, how you have practiced sexual intimacy, how you use money, laws. The military comes from the religion, how you educate kids, how you punish kids, what you can and cannot do in the normal, ordinary aspects of your life. So when you look at all of this stuff combined, then a picture emerges. The picture that emerges is no matter when you've been on the planet, the gods have been at war and are at war. And the picture emerging is one of a constant hierarchical control. Now, what I'm leading to is a kind of a big picture. I would say that about 95% of the time, when I actually identify what it is that's leading to chronic fatigue, illness, life crisis, disease, cancer, chronic structural problems that nobody can figure out, it's almost always some kind of belief about what God wants, what God expects, guilt, shame, repressed sins. And so I came to the realization a long time ago that belief systems are probably the most dangerous thing there is, anything with an ism. And the problem is that all these belief systems, our government, all religions, they all create a architecture of a controlling mother-father type energy, which puts everybody else in the position of a child that can't make decisions for themselves, that need to be told what to do. You can't get to God unless you go through the church, and this kind of craziness. So when we come into a body as a soul, we basically go from a state of unity or living in the eternal now as in a state of oneness with all that is into a body. Arthur M. Young, who wrote several great books, and if you don't know who Arthur M. Young is, he's the inventor of the Bell helicopter and took his money and devoted it to creating an institute to study consciousness. He was a genius. And in his structure stages of how consciousness evolves, the first stage where the soul comes into a body in a mother's womb is called loss of freedom. And from there, you go from loss of freedom to binding. Binding means cultural enculturation or conditioning, which means, what you can and cannot do, the rules and regulations of your culture, your parents, your religion, your society. Then you go from binding to centering, which means the developing of an ego, a center, a self-center, a sense of self. Then you get to the choice point, which means that you now come to the realization that your ego is not a very good guide. And no matter how hard you try to follow all these rules and be a good person, you not only keep fighting yourself, causing trouble for yourself, but you actually never really have a sense of freedom. And you've usually spent your life doing what everybody else told you should be doing, be it teachers, parents, other influences, not what the soul wants to do, but what mommy and daddy and everybody else wants you to do, which often leads to a crisis, oftentimes a midlife crisis, where you realize, as Joseph Campbell says, you spent your entire life climbing the ladder of success only to get to the top and realize the ladder's leading on the wrong wall. And so the choice point is where you have to really get clear. What is your heart's desires? What is your dream? What is your soul calling you to do in the world? Not what does everybody else want you to do? And then you go from there to decentering, which means to progressively integrate the ego with the unconscious, so that the ego which is a tiny fraction of our total consciousness, is actually merging with the greater amount of consciousness within each of us, which is commonly called the unconscious or the self. And then you go to unbinding, which means to completely free yourself of all cultural influences, which is what a real mystic goes through. By the time you're truly a mystic, you will have unbound yourself. Rumi says to get to God, you must become a heretic. So mystics are often heretical because they've had many direct experiences of God and know that a lot of this stuff written down is just, manipulation. It's not fact. It's written by people that are not enlightened at all. In fact, Shankara, the famous Hindu philosopher sage, said in his book, The Crest Jewel of Discrimination, no one can understand scripture until they're enlightened. And when they're enlightened, they don't need scripture. And so when you look at everything that I've just shared to you, with you and your audience, we come to a very interesting realization. If you take the eagle's approach and go way up high and get the big picture view, we have what I call spirit gym. And so God has a mechanism that I call the pain teacher. So if we're not living true to our heart, or we're not taking care of our bodies and loving and respecting the gift of our body, or not taking care of the planet, or not respecting the other aspects of God called other people or nature, then pain shows up in our lives. Pain turns out to be the great quickener of consciousness, right? For example, lots of people go to the gym without proper lifting education, hurt themselves, and then end up with a therapist like me or a Chek professional, and they say, well, the reason you hurt your back is because you were deadlifting incorrectly or squatting incorrectly. But now that they have pain, they have a reason to stay awake and to pay attention. When people come to me with serious illnesses and disease, and I show them what's involved and how they created it, they get very interested in not doing those things again, because, having cancer can be very scary, as can any disease. So all of a sudden the pain awakens them. And so whenever we create pain out of acting unconsciously, it quickens consciousness. It's like a shock that wakes the system up. When the pandemic started and I saw what was going on with the lockdowns, and I used to be a paratrooper in the 2nd Airborne Division, so I've had battlefield strategy training. And the first thing they teach you in a battlefield is if you want to win a war, there's two things you got to do: knock out communications and control the food supply. Well, right away, there was censorship like crazy, people being shut down, Mercola, Sayer G, Sherry Tenpenny, the dirty dozen, they called them in this country, and many other doctors having bank accounts closed, businesses shut down, podcasts shut down. Well, that's controlling communications. And in the span of a couple of years here in the United States, there was over 120 food factories destroyed. There's been attacks on farmers all over the world, which you must be familiar with because plenty of them are right in your area. And so what do you see? You see a military strategy being used against people, which creates a lot more polarity.
A quick pause to tell you about something really important. If you've been watching this interview and wondering how all of this connects, from the climate alarmism to economic uncertainty to the cultural chaos we're witnessing right now, then you'll want to join me for our free webinar, Making Sense of the Madness. In this session, I break down the key forces shaping our world, how they intersect, and most importantly, how you can navigate the chaos with clarity, confidence, and resilience. This is about giving you the tools to cut through the noise and make better decisions for yourself and your family in uncertain times. Go to weareelevate.org/madness to register now. The link's also in the description. Please don't miss this one. It's the most important workshop I've ever hosted. Now back to the interview.
I saw this whole scenario pouring out. I've been doing this for almost, I think, 41 years now. So I've worked with thousands of patients. I have 63,000 students worldwide that are all healthcare professionals. So I'm constantly consulting with these cases that won't heal and saying, okay, well, you need to look into this, look into that, ask these questions, So I came to the realization that, existence itself is a giant spirit gym. And just like we go to the gym and work with resistance to grow strength and to grow muscle and to change the shape of our bodies and go from fat to thin or from skinny to muscular, we also have to work with resistance emotionally, mentally, and spiritually to grow. And if you don't understand that that is the nature of how consciousness evolves, which is ultimately God coming to know itself, because there's nothing outside of God, so it has to dream this into existence. And the number of mystics that have said God's dreaming us all into existence is too many. In my Spirit Gym book series, I highlight a number of them: Paramahansa Yogananda, Vivekananda, Ramana Krishna, and the list is longer. Anyone that's had deep, profound enlightenment experiences with God knows that this is what's going on. And I've had plenty of these experiences myself. So what I'm finally trying to bring to a head by giving you the pieces of the puzzle is to say what's going on in the world is exactly what has to go on in order for us to wake up to who and what we really are, who and what each of us is to each other, to the gift of the planet that we've been so unconsciously destroying for a very, very long time, which doesn't bode high for one's intelligence. I mean, anyone that lights their own house on fire and shits and pisses in their own food isn't very intelligent, which is a metaphor for exactly what humanity's doing to nature, all for profit. But, you can't eat money, and all you can take with you when you die is what you become. And if you become a rich idiot, then you die a rich idiot, and you can't take your money with you, which is why Jesus says in the Bible, a rich man can no sooner get to heaven than a camel can get through the eye of a needle. So ultimately, what the world is a consciousness generation plant, if you want to call it a plant. But really, we're in an environment where immature souls take on bodies to confront polarity and resistance and ultimately learn what they are, what they really are, and who they really are. And when consciousness makes it to the heart, you realize it's all God acting out a great big, mythological play in which we each have the degree of free will and co-creativity to participate in the play that matches our level of awareness of who and what we really are. So somebody that's completely programmed and believes the World Economic Forum is right, or that we're really having a global warming effect, or that we're going to be saved by a president, or that Jesus is going to come back and rescue us, or anything like that. That's the level of consciousness that they're at. So they're not going to see too much beyond their own mental construct. In fact, Dustin DePerna, who did a lot of research on the growth of and evolution of consciousness, makes a very clear point in his book, Streams of Wisdom. No Christian having an enlightenment experience ever sees the Buddha. So what is he saying? Even if you have a confrontation with God, all you will see is your belief system mirrored back at you, because you cannot perceive anything without a mental construct. So if you believe that all the other religions are a sin and that you can only be saved by Jesus or being a Christian, then you will never allow yourself to see the truth because it does not fit your construct. So ultimately, Spirit Gym is where we start off as kindergarten students, and we fight over the hopscotch box, and we scratch and bite each other and put crazy glue on toilet seats and, do stupid shit. And then as we wake up a little bit, we do less stupid shit. And eventually, if we are graced by God, or we have the depth of wisdom to go beyond ideologies and memorizations of scripture into a legitimate spiritual practice, for which there's many approaches, from meditation to dance to art to plant medicine use and ceremony to giving birth, to prayer, etc., etc. Tai Chi, Qigong. There's as many ways to God as there is people, but the difference, if the orientation is to really, truly engage life from the heart and learn and grow and be the best person you can be and find contact and connection with your own soul, which is God within you, then you evolve to where you can actually start seeing beyond the limits of the matrix. And you can see that, as wild and crazy as it is, it's exactly what it takes in order for us to wake up and get past material limitations and belief system limitations and see that, well, I'll put it this way. Dan, I'll ask you a simple question that'll prove my point, because I know you will get this question correct, when the answer correct.
Let's give it a go.
Since the beginning of the pandemic, about 5 years ago, how much more awake are people to the fact that they're being lied to, tricked, that they can't trust doctors, that science approves everything that kills people, that politicians can't be trusted, that they have to think for themselves, make better decisions, and that they better be paying attention to the food they're eating, and that they better learn how to get along with each other, and that they better start working together to create systems of power, money, and energy and communications that don't depend on the gods of control, the control oligarchs. I mean, so the question I'm asking is, has the pain teacher
yes.
of the pandemic served to quicken consciousness and awaken people more than probably anything in a long, long time?
Unbelievably so. Yeah, I mean,
there you go. Welcome to Spirit Gym.
Yeah. Well, this brings us to an interesting point of inflection, because you're absolutely right. The acceleration of the awakening during this time has been phenomenal to see. And I consider myself to be within that. I've always been someone who's deeply curious, massive thirst for wisdom, always asking questions, seeking to understand everything. My brain has always been like that. I've always had a natural skepticism of politics and different systems and structures, but COVID blew the lid off for me, deepened my understanding. But what I'm curious for, I'm curious for yourself. What was your plot twist moment? Because I just feel like in the introductory part of this discussion, we've taken 5,000 books that you've referred to and condensed it into 20, 30 minutes worth of...
That's correct. But not just books, a lot of personal experience.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, infinitely more experiences, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, anyone that's been in my library, they usually are quite shocked when they start looking through the books, because not only do I read them, but I leave notes all over the place in them. I have a whole cataloging system in every book. I keep journals of how I'm going to apply what I learn. I put it to work. I test it. That's how I built the entire Chek Institute, is through study, either with reading or going to the best teachers I could find on any given topic, then testing it in clinic, in my own life, refining it, and then sharing it and turning it over to my systems to do the same with. So anyhow, I forgot what you were asking me.
It's funny. I'm reflecting back to the seeing me, seeing you, seeing me. It's just those books you just picked up. I've got those same sort of leather-bound moleskin type journals.
Yes.
Yourself, and my library over there has probably only got 100 on, but when people see that, they say, "Oh, you've got some good books." Yeah, you see the other ones, you see the other one in the attic.
Yeah.
But I feel like my first 40 years in life has been breathing in the wisdom, and the next chapter for me is now to breathe it out. It's like I've taken so much in, but what you've been able to do is transform it and translate it into practices and ways of being that people can apply. But what I'm curious for you, this is an awakening period, but what was your awakening? What was the plot twist in your life? Because you went from really focusing on the physical transformation to now this really elevated, integral, holistic curriculum that's ever expanding. What tapped you into your deeper consciousness to see beyond the simple practices that you began with, or the initial practices that you started with?
Well, my system's actually always been holistic. I can show you that all the way back to the very beginning. It's just that I didn't talk about a lot of the spiritual aspects of it in public because people were way too not ready and for it. In fact, probably around the year 2000, we hired business consultants for the Chek Institute. And at that time, I wanted to change the name to Chek Holistic Exercise Kinesiology instead of Chek High Performance Exercise Kinesiology. And there was 3 of them, and they all said, don't do it, because holistic's considered to be a kind of a hippie concept, and nobody will have any faith in what you do. But then 20 years later, it was, if you weren't holistic, you were lost. And so that's that. But even in
start there, Paul, because
I'll tell you. I'll tell you.
So I read the Tao Te Ching when I was 25, and it went straight over my head at 25. 10 years later, knocking on my door, and it was like Wilhelm's book. I mean, my favorite is actually the Benjamin Hoff's the Tao of Pooh and the Tea of.
Yeah, I know that book.
But it took a while for me to actually embrace it. So, from your early integrative process, how did you come to realize that it can't just be this one component? Because that's unusual.
Okay, so the way that happened is my mother was a Christian Scientist until I was 12, and then she joined the Self-Realization Fellowship, which is the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. So it's Hinduism. And Christianity scared the hell out of me as a child. I mean, nobody would answer my questions. I was really very nervous that adults couldn't see the obvious problems inherent in everything about Christianity. I mean, I'd be sitting in church being told God is love, God loves you, but then I'd be told God will burn you in hell if you do this or that or touch your genitals or any other thing. And so without a long to do, I was very, very stressed about it. And it made me very afraid of God. And it made me wonder, what the hell did I do wrong to be trapped here? And it made me very, very concerned that adults themselves didn't seem to even notice these contradictions and couldn't answer my questions. And I'd get in trouble for asking questions like that. But once my mother joined the Self-Realization Fellowship Temple, it was like my whole world changed. And for the first time, I could talk to monks and ask them any question, and they never rejected me or talked down to me. They could answer my questions with very, really good answers. They weren't just quoting Bible verses and telling me I must, be quiet and listen and not talk. They introduced me to meditation. Yogananda's teachings are highly holistic. So he has a diet component. He has an exercise component. He has an inner work component. They really believe in a very, very wholesome life and love and respect for nature. They're very good gardeners. They take care of the soil. These are very, very, compared to what I experienced in Christianity, it was like a completely other world in which I felt very, very safe comparatively. And it calmed my parents down. They used to fight like hell But once my stepfather spent a year meditating and going to the temple meetings, he was a completely different man. Unfortunately, when he stopped going, he became, a grizzly bear of great danger like he was before. So I saw what happens when you engage these practices, but when you disengage. And so, through the teachings of the Self-Realization Fellowship, then when I was 15, I went to summer camp. So I got to spend the summer with the monks and I learned more, and I got to, lift weights with them, play basketball, work on the grounds. I got to live with them and meditate with them. And so I really got to have the joy of realizing what truly God realized people looked like, felt like, acted like, related like. So it gave me a measuring stick where I could really begin, even as a child, to sense who's awake and who's not awake. Because of the stress in my family, my father drowned when I was 8. My stepfather was a very violent man, very controlling man who had no concept of what a child was and just worked us like freaking slaves on the farm. Very, very intense, hard upbringing for a child. And I hated being alive. I just hated, I missed my father really bad. I had a lot of pain in me. It was just a very complex, painful experience. I began spontaneously having out-of-body experiences when I was 12. And my father used to make us go to bed at 7 or 7:30 every night. And on Vancouver Island in the summertime, it's light till 11 o'clock at night. So imagine being a frickin' 12-year-old kid trapped in your bedroom with, nothing but 4 walls. I couldn't do much of anything because if I made any noise, my father would come check to see if you were in bed. And if you weren't, you might get your teeth knocked out. So it was just a very, very stressful environment. So I spontaneously, one night when it first happened, all of a sudden I was just about to fall asleep. And I had a moment where I was looking down at myself from up by the ceiling. I was lucid and I in this dream, and I went, oh my God, I'm out of my body. And then I remember actually just staring at myself in bed. But then I got scared. I'm like, how can this be? And I got scared. And the instant that I got scared, my spirit entered back into my body. And it literally was like someone hit me, like when you do a cardiac paddles on someone to shock their heart back. And I could feel the intensity of my spirit coming back into my body, and my body jumped like I'd been shocked. And I went, oh my God, that is crazy. What just happened? But I laid there and thought about it. And I thought, well, if I can do it once, I can do it again. And so I thought, well, wouldn't this be amazing? Because then I'd be free. And so I just relaxed my mind, and basically what I did is I just put my focus up by the ceiling where I was the previous time and just said to my inner self, let's do that again. And I hold my focus, and literally I could feel and see a body of light rise right up out of my body, float up to the ceiling, and then I could put my attention on that body and look through it back at my physical body. This fascinated me so much, and it just literally blew my mind. And I thought, okay, I'm going to practice this because I want to figure out what's really going on here. So again, I'm 12 years old at this time. So then I got to good enough where I could actually float around and control it. And I could okay, I'm definitely in control now. I'm not afraid. So I said to my inner self, I wonder if I can go through the wall. And then I heard a voice inside of myself say, let's try it. And I just held my intention on being outside of the house, and I floated right through the wall like nothing, like it was nothing. Literally just like an electromagnetic wave can move through the house to your phone. And so then I found myself outside, and I thought, well, this is interesting. So I started just touring around and looking, and we had a 142-acre farm, so it's a big place. And so I thought to myself, I wonder if I'm hallucinating, or, if I'm losing my mind. And I was afraid to say anything to my parents because they probably would have checked me into the hospital or something. So what I did is I started going around the farm and trying to identify objects, whether it be a chainsaw or a hammer, maybe something that, like I could go out walking in the forest, and then I would say, okay, there's a tree, because we had a lot of bears. I could see there was a bear scratch on the tree. And then I would get up first thing in the morning, and I did this for a long time, and I would go out and look. And sure enough, every single time I found exactly what I saw while I was out roaming around in my spirit body at night. And so I realized later that what I was doing was called remote viewing. And I actually won a remote viewing contest in London in the year, I believe, 2000 at the Field Conference put on by Lynn McTaggart, and Edgar Mitchell was the key speaker. And they had a one-day training in remote viewing run by the CIA's director of remote viewing. And then they had a contest at the end of it. There was 750 people in this class, and I won the contest. And so I realized then that I had been remote viewing since I was a child, and just didn't know it was called remote viewing. And so what I'm trying to describe to you is that through the stress of my childhood, it was almost as though I either had to get brave enough to kill myself, or I had to figure out how to live. And the only way I could figure out how to live was to figure out how to get out of the confines of what was choking the child in me so much that I didn't want to live. But once I figured it out, I realized that there was a lot more going on here on planet Earth than we were being told by anybody that I could talk to. And that's why I had so many questions for the monks. And it's why I had a lot of questions I couldn't get answered by other people. And that led me to really a life of research and practice. And I worked with Master Fong Ha, who was in the ancient lineage of Tai Chi and Qigong masters. He became my master, and I worked with him for several years to develop a simple system of Tai Chi, Qigong type exercises, which are in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, called work-in exercises to help people cultivate life force energy. I worked with shaman. I worked with all sorts of people to learn different approaches and different concepts and different ways of relating to spirit or God. I, in the year 2006, did a year of training with a medical, he's not a medical doctor, he was a chiropractor, but he used plant medicines to help people heal trauma and have spiritual experiences. So I did a year of training with him. Then I became licensed through the Native American Council to do plant medicine ceremonies as part of healing ceremonies legally. And so I've conducted over 1,000 plant medicine ceremonies in my career, and I did a lot of research on them myself. And I had a lot of samadhi experiences through meditation. I had many union experiences with the universe doing Tai Chi. I got certified in medical Qigong and incorporated that into my practice and helped people heal that way. The one thing I forgot to tell you, because you're asking for the pivotal moment, there was a time when I was probably around the time that this out-of-body experiences began to happen. I was just so upset. I was born in Los Angeles, and my parents had a pig farm in Idaho for a few years. Then they had a sheep farm in Oregon, but then they immigrated to Vancouver Island, British Columbia in 1972. For an LA kid, man, I just did not like the cold and the constant rain. The first year we moved to Vancouver Island, we had 8 feet of snow, and I'm like, oh my God, this is gnarly. And it was just a lot of work and constantly shoveling snow and blah, blah, blah. But the point being is that I reached a point where I was so upset and so frustrated and so pissed off at God. And this is a Christian God before I got into the Self-Realization Fellowship. One day I was out in the field picking rocks because we had a lot of rocks in our land, and they ruined farm equipment. So whenever we weren't feeding animals, fixing fences, and doing other stuff, my father would just tell us to go out in the fields and pick rocks. And I hated it. And it was freaking cold and windy and rainy, and I'm covered in mud, and I'm just like pissed off because I had this childhood sense I didn't come to the world to do this. And and I didn't ever want to have a dad that was fucking brutal. And really wanted my real father. So, when you're a kid, you can't understand a lot of these things. But anyhow, I got right pissed off at God. I just standing in the middle of a 10-acre field, freezing cold, soaking wet. And I just started screaming at God, saying, why? What have I done wrong? Why do I have to do this? Why'd you take my father away? It's a conversation between a young boy and God, right? And all of a sudden, out of everywhere, from every angle at once, a voice came to me and said, don't worry. You will live a life of purpose. Everything will be okay. And it scared the shit out of me.
I want to take a quick break before we continue because there's an important event coming up that you just cannot miss. On September the 13th and 14th, the Health Optimization Summit is returning to London. It's Europe's biggest health event, bringing together over 35 world-leading speakers, including Barbara O'Neill, Dr. Josh Axe, Dr. Rhonda Wright, Ben Greenfield, and many more. You'll discover game-changing strategies to optimize your mind with insights on psychedelics, meditation, nootropics, flow states, and psychological health. You'll learn how to upgrade your body with hacks for the gut and liver optimization, fertility and hormones, functional medicine and heavy metal detox. And you'll discover how to supercharge your environment and reduce exposure to EMFs. I'll be there and I'll love for you to join me. Tickets are available now. They are selling fast, but you can get 10% off when you use the discount code ELEVATE at the checkout. So just hit the link in the description or go to weareelevate.org/health summit to secure your spot today. All right, let's get back to our podcast conversation.
I was literally like shaking because I was looking everywhere and there was nobody there. I'm in the middle of 10-acre field by myself. And this voice was so profound and so all encompassing. It was literally inside me, outside of me, above me, below me, around me. And it just shocked me. I mean, it really tripped me out. And so that had an effect of easing me, because I knew I'd had some kind of a legitimate experience with God. Then again, when I was 19, I was working in the drilling industry, water well and exploration drilling. I was covered in mud, working long shifts and feeling like, God, all I'm doing is drilling friggin' holes in the dirt. This is like, I can't live this way, because if I'm here, I must be here to do something more than this. And I just had this feeling like I needed to meditate, because by then I'd been with the monks and we had to cross from an island where we were doing exploration drilling back to the mainland to get home. And when we got on the ferry, the guys went up to have a coffee and I just sat in the truck and went into meditation. And I said to God, last time you told me my life would be of purpose, and here I am just drilling holes in the earth, working my ass off for slave labor wages. And by that time, my son was born when I just turned 18. So I had the responsibilities of a father, but I just felt like my life was being wasted, and strangely enough, the same voice came back to me and said, don't worry, your life will be a life of purpose. But this time it said, you will become a massage therapist and you'll be able to control your own schedule, and you will have the freedom that you want in your life and an environment that you can control. Now that shocked me because I didn't know anything about massage therapy. So I thought it was like, wow, massage therapist. But the only memory I had was from my grandmother, because I had asthma as a kid. And my grandmother would massage my chest and my back, and she's the only one that could take my asthma away. Nothing else worked. The inhalers didn't work. So I thought, that's interesting. That made me think of my grandmother. Well, lo and behold, a few years later, here I am, the trainer of the Army boxing team, and I implemented the first massage therapy program. I studied sports massage therapy by reading books and practicing, and I was now the massage therapist for 32 of the world's best amateur boxers. And then I left the Army and went to sports massage therapy school. And it was through working with the Army doctor, Charles Pitluck, who was an osteopathic physician. I got 2 years in training in how to care for acute sports injuries with him. He was very interested in my work because it was enhancing the boxing team's performance like crazy. I was put in charge of nutrition, designing and implementing all their conditioning programs, and managing the gym. And so basically I became a very shall we say, successful trainer and a massage therapist. And when I left the Army, I went to the Sports Massage Therapy Institute in Encinitas, which is, an hour's drive from here. And my career just went crazy after that. And so the answer to your question is these experiences that shocked me into different realizations were not only the out-of-body experience, but me reaching an impasse with God and then having what I could only describe as God respond to me 2 different times. And exactly what I was told turned out to be true. So, and then I've had many, many mystical experiences, union experiences, both on plant medicines and without, through Tai Chi, Qigong meditation. And so I've been able to compare the plant medicine path with the natural path. I did 18 years of daily Tai Chi, often, sometimes, many times, twice a day under Master Feng He. So I committed myself to these practices. I've meditated for very long time. And so my institute weaves all these concepts together, from the physical aspects to the emotional, to the mental, to the spiritual, looking at the structure of the body, the orthopedics of the body, how it works, diet, lifestyle, the importance of the soil, and the importance of farming. I studied soil science. So I put a very integrated system together. By the time I started the Chek Institute in 1995, I had, I think, 11 years of clinical experience. I began in January 84 as the trainer of the Army boxing team, and I started the Institute in 95. So I had 11 years of clinical experience working with a lot of the best athletes in the world, and I was very, very successful when I started my own practice out of the military. I moved to San Diego, went to sports massage school in 1986, and had a huge successful practice working with many professional athletes from all over the world, because I was a specialist in medical failures. So literally Olympic committees and professional athletes were like common on my schedule. I was seeing all sorts of these people. And so I had enough awareness that my approach was effective. And I was encouraged by well-known people in the conditioning and rehab industry to start my own institute. I started lecturing professionally in 1988 to physical therapists, chiropractors, osteopaths, medical doctors, strength coaches, but mostly the professional medical community. And so by 95, I had a pretty solid track record. I had a big following. I had written countless articles. And then from there, I just continued to study and travel and learn. And I spent probably the first 20 years of my career traveling the world looking for the very best doctors and therapists of any type that were experts in areas that I knew I needed to learn more about, because I kept having these patients show up on my treatment table with every other strange thing you could think of. So the way I educated myself is to go to the very best people in the world and study them and work with them until I felt like I had a level of mastery. And then I would take their approaches back, test them in the clinic, and then integrate them with the other things that I'd learned. So ultimately, the Chek Institute basically became a multidisciplinary institute that integrates all different aspects of healing into a working system. And so you can have medical doctors, chiropractors, osteopaths, acupuncturists, nurses, strength coaches, personal trainers, massage therapists, dance and movement educators, and truck drivers all in the same class. Correct. And so that's really kind of a synthesis of what happened. But the turning point was that experience where all of a sudden God started talking to me, and it scared the hell out of me. But it was so profound. It took me from the concept of God as a bunch of stories people believe in to something real. And then I never lost touch with that presence. And it's been with me all the time. And it's with all of us. It's just most of us are too unconscious to access it.
Well, Paul, you've inadvertently asked what I was going to start the podcast with. Given our discussion at the beginning, I thought I wanted to find the deeper insight. And I think our discussion has done that. And I think you have actually answered the question I will ask to you now, but maybe this will help us to bring it down to some sort of a practical synthesis that people can take home. But I was curious initially to ask, in a world that now it's almost like we're drowning in information about health, our well-being, Tony Robbins would say we're starving for wisdom amongst that knowledge. And I think that's true. But despite all of that knowledge, we seem to be getting sicker, unhappier, more stressed, more burnt out. So my question to you, what is the missing piece? What is it we're not seeing? In many ways, I feel like you've prescribed the piece that's been missing, but for many people. And I would be curious to know if you would agree with that. And then how do we address that missing component? If we have all of this knowledge, how do we actually find our way home back to that point of well-being, of flourishing, of potential, of purpose?
Well, it goes back to the issues that made the pandemic successful for the dark side, and that was that the pandemic was really the beginning of an initiation, a rite of passage initiation. It's very well known in depth psychology, Jungian psychology, and other sources that if we don't go through a legitimate initiation, we will unconsciously attract one to ourselves. Because if we stay in the child archetype, we don't take responsibility for ourselves, and we always defer to authority figures to make decisions for us. And we've been doing that for thousands of years. It's interesting that prior to the onset of the patriarchal control system, there is good research showing that about 7,000 years ago that we were matriarchal, and that the archaeological research shows no indications of war whatsoever for the 7,000 years that we were a matriarchal culture worldwide. But we have fallen into the trap. 85% of the world population claims religious affiliation. Those that are not in the religious camp are now in the scientific materialist camp, so they too have their God figures. Anybody that's got a degree in science is some kind of an expert that they deify, just like a priest. So what you'll see here, excuse the crinkling, it's my beautiful bag of vaporized herbs and oils and essences that I like to modulate my consciousness with to make my work more fun. No pot when I work, though. Just nice flowers and things. But anyhow, from a spiritual perspective, this is what I call externalization of the self. So the self is who you really are. You're much more than Dan, the guy that I'm looking at on the camera. Within the context of the self, we have the unconscious, we have the highest self, we have the soul, and we have the ego. The ego is like the periscope on a massive submarine. Most of us is under the water, and the surface of the water represents conscious awareness. But most of our heart's desires, our soul's impulse for evolution, and the things that really matter are below the ego structure. And the ego structure is a construct created by other people. If you were to be able to download your ego consciousness onto a supercomputer and have it filter out which ideas are authentically of your own making and are not the products of a school teacher, a parental influence, a religious influence, or a social influence, you'd be lucky if you could find 2% of the contents of your ego that was actually your own. So our ego construct is largely created by other people, yet we fall into the trap of thinking it's who we are. And so until we become a legitimate adult, which in native cultures came through a ceremony, which was a very dangerous ceremony that often brought you to the very edge of death and included the use of very powerful psychedelic medicines, vision quests, physical beatings, and things that we would call torture to the child out of the young person so that they became an adult that's capable of defending their tribe and facing death eye to eye without backing down. And so we don't have that. And so we've been raised in this sort of kind of like a video game arcade of, constant distractions and surrounded by experts on everything telling us what we must think and what we must do, exactly like the plandemic. And so what I call that is externalizing the self. People don't really recognize their essence. They don't listen to the voice inside of themselves that guides them to be good to other people. I tell people all the time, if you just put do unto others as you would have them do unto you 1,000 times over in the Bible and get rid of the rest of the shit, we'd actually get somewhere. So when people identify themselves as the money they have, the car they drive, the place they live in, the status symbol, their rank, their level of authority, then they don't know themselves as anything else. And if you, for example, I've had to work with many elite athletes that got very bad injuries and couldn't go back to performing, but they'd so identified them as an athlete, themselves as an elite athlete making millions of dollars a year, that when all that is stripped away from them, they go into a very deep crisis of self. And for some of them, it can lead to. And so I've had to work with these people and other people with the same types of issues in careers for the same reasons. Often it's a disease that will knock the career people out, but it's bad injuries that knock the athletes out. And I've had this happen to myself at one time. But the point is a person goes into a state of what's called the dark night of the soul, where they don't know who they are. They've lost their sense of identity. So if they can't find a deeper spiritual connection to who they really are on the inside, which usually requires the skill of someone like me to guide them into that, they'll drug themselves out, become addicts, get depressed, kill themselves. Often they become very violent in their relationships, and the relationships fall apart. So now if you look at how we have externalized ourselves into our identification as an ism, I'm a vegetarian and God forbid you challenge my viewpoint, or I'm a Christian, or I'm a Muslim, or I'm Jewish, or I'm Islamic, or, whatever it is, I'm this or I'm that. That's all an externalization of the self. And that's all just a bunch of ideas being worshipped that are created by other people. There's no authentic connection to one's own heart and one's own soul. The soul is the consciousness within us. So we, I believe, have collectively drawn ourselves into a situation where our unconscious, that we have repressed all the evil and all the darkness and all the manipulation and all the greed that we keep denying, and all the death in the world and all the starving people and all the inequalities and racial inequalities and sexual inequalities. We've repressed that so long that it has to eventually rise up to the surface before we destroy ourselves. And so now I think what's going on in the world is we're actually seeing our shadow being manifest. So we have to confront it and come to a decision about how do we want to live and what's really important, and how do we get past this without destroying each other and the planet, because we're right on the edge all the time in the last, 50 years of doing that. And I think where we're going through right now is a really a legitimate initiation into spiritual adulthood, where, as we discussed, the pandemic forced a lot of people a lot deeper into themselves and to ask a lot better questions and bigger questions, and to get quite still inside. Because, when you look at the statistics, the recent statistics I've heard is estimates are that between 22 and 32 million people have died from the safe and effective choice, which obviously wasn't the safe and effective choice, but that's what the Pope was telling people to do. The Dalai Lama was telling people to do that and did it. Deepak Chopra, of all people, Jordan Peterson. A lot of the people that you think would have had the intelligence and the spiritual courage to maintain their values and defend our sovereignty and our freedom caved in and went into a crisis of their own, I'm sure. So this is what's happened to a lot of people. Countless is the number of people that have come back to me after being vaccinated and saying, "Oh my God, Paul, you're not going to believe what's happening to me." And many of them now gotten cancers and died. People even in my own family that didn't listen to me have had serious problems and died. And so when you're face to face with, your own shadow, and Jung said, if you don't meet the unconscious on the inside, it will meet you on the outside in the events of your life, and you will call it fate. So what is he saying? If you don't go within to learn who you really are and what you really are, and learn to work with and manage your creative power, you are going to have to meet it on the outside of yourself. And that's the arrival of the pain teacher. And so I think collectively we have manifested just enough evil to force us to have to sit square in the mirror and say, can we live this way? How do I live in harmony with higher truth? How do we get back to harmony with nature and each other? And ultimately, it's an inside job. And as Lao Tzu said, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. Lao Tzu also said, if you want to change the world, change yourself. And so I think that we are racing the clock. Can we wake up together before we destroy each other? Steiner said something very profound. He said, human beings will continue to invent technologies outside of themselves until they either destroy the world or realize that everything they've invented outside of themselves is an inferior copy of what is inside of them. The question is, which will come first? And so here we all are. And so I think we're fortunately now more awake than we've ever been, but the awakening is the first step. Many people, for example, awaken in an ayahuasca journey or a mushroom journey, but probably 95% of them 2 weeks later are the same village idiot they ever were, because they don't have the discipline to apply what they've learned, to ask for forgiveness from the people they've hurt, and to step into the shoes of a spiritual adult. And they keep thinking the medicine's going to fix them, or that if they do enough drugs, they'll get enlightened, or whatever their story is. So my point is, we've got to go from the awakening stage to the action stage. And Ken Wilber basically says this beautifully. He says, we have to wake up, clean up, grow up, and show up. So I think ultimately now we've had a wake up. Clean up means we have to pay careful stock to our unconscious and our personal judgments against self and other, and our withholds and our secrets and our lies that, if found out, would destroy our spousal relationships, our friendships, etc. And that's the cleanup. You've got to do some honest cleaning up inside, and not only acknowledge where you could have done better for yourself and other people, but where you will do better. Growing up means taking responsibility for the fact that you are part of the world, and you must use your love and your creativity to create solutions and be the change. That's the growing up. And then showing up is doing what you and I are doing right now. And that's inspiring other people and doing what you can do in the world. If you're a doctor, then be a loving, wise doctor that doesn't, follow the rules of idiots and go against the Hippocratic Oath. If you're a painter, then you can paint the truth. If you're an author, then you can write the truth. If you're a dancer, you can dance the truth. If you're a singer, you can sing the truth. So I think really we're at a point now where we must step into heart-centered awareness and share our love in ways that are authentically aligned with our own soul's creative abilities, and do what we came to the world to do, and support each other through acts of love and the realization that we need each other, all of us, no matter what color you are, no matter what country you're from, no matter what religion you practice. We all need each other, because the forces working against us now are going to require that we circle the globe and put our hands together, or we're going to go into a level of tyranny that's something only Aboriginals, Indians, and people that have been forced out by white men can appreciate. So I think right now we're probably in the most important era of human evolution there is, because our technological abilities are about 15 measures ahead of our moral consciousness, which is very, very dangerous. We have very spiritually inept people with the power to destroy the world. There's enough nuclear weapons locked and loaded right now to completely destroy the earth 179 times over, which is not a very intelligent thing to do. And Lao Tzu, as you know, talks about that in the Tao Te Ching. He said, you build a weapon, your neighbor builds a bigger weapon. You build a bigger one, and that goes on until you destroy each other. So I think we're really in an initiation to the heart, which would be, in the teachings of Ra, the fourth dimension. So rising out of the third chakra, which is all about me, who am I, self, ego-oriented to love-oriented. And I don't think we'll survive if we don't honor and worship, love and respect everything that we need to love, worship, and respect, which is each other and nature, because nature is the very fabric of our existence. We can't be any healthier than the soil. We can't be healthier than the water, and we can't be healthier than the skies, all of which have been completely and utterly hijacked by large corporations and poisoned to make us profitable and controllable and weak and stupid. And the mountain of research that proves that is very vast. So the question is, are we ready to wake up, clean up, grow up, and show up? And I think that's really what has been going on in the 5 years. It's to kick us into a higher level of awareness, to realize if you keep being passive, you will be a farm animal, and it won't be pleasant. You will be in a factory farm where every thought, feeling, and emotion is controlled. Every purchase is controlled. You'll have digital ID. You'll have forced vaccinations, and you'll be just simply a pig in a corporate farm at best. So if people haven't figured that out yet, they're a little slow, but the number of people that have is significant. And now you see beautiful networks popping up. You got Children's Health Defense. You got Green Med Info by Sayer G. You've got Moms Across America. You've got, organizations over there. You've got the British Soil Association, which I've used for years for research, and it's a great association. You've got farmers associations popping up. You've got the consciousness of regenerative farming really coming online, biodynamic farming. Steiner's teachings are more popular than ever. You've got the breakdown of Orthodox religion and a growth of what we would call spirituality versus religious dogma. We've got people waking up to the fact that the priests and the churches and the religions and the governments are all just really control freaks that are more after your money than they have any concern for you whatsoever, which is, well documented. So I think we're actually in a beautiful place. The question is, can we get from the wake up to the clean up, grow up, and show up? And can we do it before every day that we wait, it gets harder to be proactive because they get away with more and more stuff like destroying the Constitution of the United States. The Biden administration was an example of just how far evil can get into a country and how badly it can. And the Biden administration literally tried to bankrupt the entire country and completely destroy family values. I mean, the list of shit the Biden administration did. So as much as I've never really been a fan of Donald Trump because he's just a better criminal, it's been great to see that he has actually made a lot of positive changes. So there's a good example of staying open-minded, because sometimes the devil turns out to be an angel. And I'm not saying I sit back and wait for Donald Trump to fix things. I'm saying at least he's got a sense of nationalism. He disconnected the United States from the World Economic Forum. He didn't agree with them. He's bringing industry back to the United States. He's actually doing what it takes to be a sovereign nation and get people to work together as a nation again. And, you see what's happened to Canada. You see what's happened to you guys. You see what's happened to Australia, New Zealand. And these are like great examples of what not to let the United States become, because I must say you guys are in far worse shape than we are right now with all this crap. So you need the clean up, grow up, and show up movement to happen with great intensity, because you don't have a wild, crazy ass kicker like Trump running your country. You got when you read the stuff that King Charles says, some of this shit I've read that he writes, I am the king of the universe, and, everybody will worship me, and all this is like crazy crap. And then he's heavily involved in the World Economic Forum, and talk about fucking lunacy. That's just crazy. I have a huge student base in England. Our CEOs in England, our Chek Institute's run out of England. I've spent countless years lecturing. I know the English culture and the English kind of environment very, very well. And so you guys have all the right stuff, but you guys have been under kings and queens and in the child archetype forever too. So it's time for you guys and all the Australians and the Kiwis and all the people that are repressed around the world to just fucking say that's enough of this shit and stop funding all this crap. And the question is, are people willing to go through the discomfort of a legitimate sacrifice to create something beautiful? And that's how they've hooked us with phones and technology and chemicals and food. So most people are just like addicted to all this shit. And their thought of being able to get by without it is they'd rather be dead. Well, that's
ironically what you'll end up getting.
Steiner actually said there would be a third world war and that either China or India would become the next superpower. The pandemic, you could say, was the fifth generation world war, the warfare of the mind, and it's still going on, even though it doesn't look like it to a lot of people. So, we really have to dream big together. And then, as the Quakers say, pray and move your feet. You can't just sit around waiting for Jesus to come fix it or some politician, because that's never worked and it never will work. Now we've got to become adults and start creating together and take responsibility for the fact that this is our home. This is our environment. I mean, look how much money is being spent to put people on the moon and on Mars while our oceans are poisoned, the Great Barrier Reef's dying, the rainforest is being chopped down at record rate. The insect population is dangerously low. Entomologists say that Armageddon may be near because in the last 50 years, there's been a 75% reduction in the insect population on the planet, which is the sex organs of the planet. We've got animal species all over the world being born as hermaphrodites. They've because of all the chemicals in the oceans and the rivers and the streams and the lakes. We have Edward O. Wilson says we've killed off more animal species in the last 50 years than every source of death in the prior existence of life on this planet. I mean, when you start taking stock of how far down the fucking river we are heading straight for the waterfall of death, it's pretty shocking. Most people don't like to hear stuff like this because they don't want to have to get involved. And there's the child that just wants to watch cartoons and not have to have the responsibility of a parent. So, that's what I see going on, the externalization of the self. But we've got to now wake up, clean up, grow up, and show up, become adults, and really work together to create something beautiful and defund and dismantle dysfunctional education systems, political systems. And a great example of what Trump did is he's defunding the entire university system and public education system. And he's creating an open education system that will allow people to go to college for free, that will give a lot more competition in education so people have a much wider selection, and so that corporate entities cannot control the education systems and brainwash people into being robots for disastrous things like poisoning the earth with dangerous chemicals and calling that a university education. So as scary as it is, it's beautiful.
I'm with you on that point. We're really almost out of time, maybe actually out of time. But I want to close by asking you a final question for everyone at home who's gone through that period of awakening in the last few years, or even prior to this.
Yeah.
For the myriad experiences you've had or practices you've had, what would you say is the Fuse Lao Tzu, that first step into moving beyond awakening into that action through those 4 stages that you've outlined? What's the one thing that someone can start embracing today to move into that next phase?
I think the simplest practice, it's the one I use as my main practice and that I teach to all my students in my Spirit Gym program and whenever I can through the Chek Institute training. But the practice is simply this: use your heart to feel what you know. Only the heart can deliver justice to the head. If we have justice in the head without the heart, then we're almost always left braining it and not paying attention to the whole picture and what's really just or unjust. They say that the longest journey you'll ever take is from your head to your heart. It's only a foot, but it takes people, potentially hundreds of lifetimes to get there. But in religion and spirituality, the heart is often said to be the home of the soul. So that's where our true nature lives, is in our heart. And so if we use our heart to feel what we know, and we're brave enough to ask the question when facing challenges, what would love do now? Then we become spiritual warriors. And instead of killing people, we look for ways to find common needs and common values and ways we can support each other, because ultimately what we're facing right now is a threat to every living creature on this planet, not just human beings, but to every living creature. I mean, there are many documentaries and reports now showing that governments are spraying glyphosate over national forests all over the world. Why in the world would you poison your own forest? Well, we know what we know about glyphosate, which is very cancer-causing, destroys the microorganism population, disrupts the metabolic function in the microorganisms, and will kill our entire soil and forests, and just like it screws up the microbiomes and leads to metabolic syndrome and cancer in human beings. Yet these corporations are so greedy and so ruthless, and they've got such powerful lobbyists inside governments that they get billions and billions of dollars out of the taxpayers' money to basically just poison the entire planet for massive profits. So when we're facing something like that, the natural urge is to extinct them, kill them, wipe them out. But then we're using the same level of injustice and evil to eradicate them that they're using against us. So we're really no better. So it's a big step up to really bring your consciousness to your heart and take the time each day to open your heart, connect to your heart, breathe through your heart, and let your heart be your compass. And then when facing challenges in your own health or your own relationships or your own life, just really ask yourself, what would love do now? And if that becomes our spiritual practice, it'll bring us all together and it'll strengthen us. And then we'll really begin to feel good about the changes we're making in the world. And if we get enough people doing it, we will be unstoppable, because there's only 165 globalist billionaires and there's 8 billion of us. So they don't have a chance once we harmonize. And research in meditation through random event generators all placed all over the world shows that 1 million people in a state of coherence is stronger than 6 billion people out of coherence. So we actually only need between 1 and 3 million people to bring themselves into a state of harmony with the intention of making the world a better place for all living beings, to create a shock wave through consciousness that literally shocks people right into an awakening where they begin to use their heart to feel what they know and ask what would love do now. And I think that's the beauty. We had to be put in the box that we're in to wake up. And that's what an initiation is. It's putting yourself, being put in the fire of real danger and having to figure out how do you get out of it and still survive, and then know that you're an adult and that you can face death and that you can use adversity to draw the best out of yourself. And, I've been a therapist for 41 years, so I've been able to take advantage of the adversity in people's lives to help them really grow and learn and feed themselves better, exercise better, understand some basic relationship skills, dream better, and get inspired to participate in their own life instead of thinking life is just happening to them, to really step into their role as a co-creator. I've seen so many lives of my students and my clients change from real stressful and scary and ugly to really beautiful and heart-centered and open to creative possibility and learning to accept challenges as opportunities. That in my lifetime, I've seen what's possible. And so I started my Spirit Gym online training and mentorship program to do my best to create a grassroots movement and I put, there's 75 lessons in there that are pre-recorded over about 85 hours of training. We have a weekly Sangha meeting where I give a fresh lesson on something important to this process we're talking about. And then I open it up oftentimes for 2 to 3.5 hours to take questions on the lessons or on challenges people are having. And I coach them exactly like I work with my private clients. And it's been amazing. It's just wild to see how the community gels together and how inspired they are and motivated they are to really live and love fully and use these practices. And so I ultimately think my whole life really was just to get the knowledge and the experience that I could create a program like this to help people. And it's just great to see it doing so well and seeing people so inspired to really be the change. And I think ultimately we all have to realize we're in spirit gym, and people get hurt in gyms when they don't know what they're doing, but people grow and become when they do know what they're doing in a gym. You know, that's where great athletes are either made or broken. And when you're in spirit gym, that's where we either realize who and what we really are and celebrate that and support that and raise our children that way and treat the planet that way, or we continue to do what we've always done, which will lead to more and more of what we've always got, which is disease and death.
Wow, Paul, from pain to purpose and beyond. In a way, I was thinking back to the beginning of our discussion and thinking, thank goodness you went through those experiences to find that path of purpose and to have that point of inflection that you talked about that led you to where you are today, now creating this ecosystem for people to navigate these wild times and come back to themselves and live through the heart, which I agree is essential in this moment in history more than ever. But you're absolutely right. From where we began this conversation, this isn't the first rodeo. Life seems to go in cycles, and it feels like this is the latest initiation, giving us another chance to learn. And it's my hope that we take this chance to learn from this experience, this point of awakening that we've been gifted with in many ways. So yeah. We'll put all of the links to the Chek Institute and the Spirit Gym in our description. Thank you so much for sharing what people can experience within the Spirit Gym. I think that was one of the things I wanted to explore, because many people are listening to this conversation and I think, well, how do I actually embody some of these things we've talked about today? And there's such a rich wisdom within the program and the opportunity to interact directly with you that can help people integrate and embody these practices and principles. So we'll put the links in the chat below. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience today, Paul, before we wrap up?
I would just say, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, then my podcast is Spirit Gym with Paul Chek. You can find that at paulchek.com. And I've got, I don't know, probably 350 episodes now, all with the greatest movers, thinkers, scientists, spiritual teachers, a wide variety of people on a wide variety of topics that are all relevant to everything we've been talking about. The Chek Institute is where people can go to learn how to be a holistic health professional for a living. A Chek practitioner is a holistic health professional. And, the Academy is a 5-year training program that, teaches you how to not only do holistic health and live it, but make a very good living at it. So it can be a career change, or it can be for your own personal health, or it can be to enhance your skill set as a healthcare professional or allied healthcare professional. So there's a lot of options that I've devoted my life to creating for people. There's over 63,000 people in the Chek training programs around the world. So, there's a fairly high level of consciousness amongst the students of the Chek Institute. Many of them are Spirit Gym practitioners as well. So, just to say that there's those options. My book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, is a very reasonably priced self-help manual that's probably the only book in the world that will help you design a program specific to your needs. If 1,000 people read the book and do the questionnaires, and it customizes, shows you where your stress levels are high and what you need to do to balance yourself, teaches you my 4-doctor system and how to apply it. And so for, a very reasonable price, I've got thousands of letters from around the world with people that were seriously ill or on drug prescriptions, whole families that just followed the book and completely healed themselves and got off of the drugs and got rid of the diseases. So that's a simple place to start. It's on Amazon. It's How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. It's the name of the book.
That book is what led us to reaching out. We were actually, I was familiar with the book already, but I was at a conference. There was 20 speakers, and it wasn't even a health conference, but it was a freedom conference. And 4 of the speakers independently referenced that book in their talks.
That's cool.
And then I interviewed Jason at the conference, Jason Christoph, and he mentioned the book within our interview. And I said, "Man, have you met Paul?" He's like, "Yeah, man, we're super connected." So it was it was a result of the book that brought us here today. So it's wild, the influence that book's had on people's lives, and how people share it as a fundamental resource in their own evolution, their own health transformation, but their own lifestyle transformation and the impact it's had on their lives. So I literally was at the event texting my team saying we've got to reach out to Paul.
Yeah, great. Well, we published all my books myself. I've published 11 books, and then my Spirit Gym series is 15 volumes. We're getting close to releasing volume 1. But I think How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy is sold around over 250,000 copies, maybe up close to 250,000, somewhere between 225 and 250,000. So it's made its way around the world many times. I've had 3 Border Patrol agents recognize my name and say, "Are you the author of the book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy?" And I said, "Yes." And they all said, "That book is fantastic. It's helped me. It's, I use it as a guidebook." And, so it's an easy way to get through customs.
Amazing. Paul, this has been a beautiful discussion. Thank you so much for being with us here today on the Astin-Gregory podcast. Please do check out the links in the description. Everything we've talked about today, from the Spirit Gym to Paul's Institute, the Chek Institute, the book, and any other resources we've talked about, you'll be able to find directly beneath this video or the audio platform you're listening on. So please do check those out. Please do share this. A lot of us who are having this moment of awakening in the last few years are grappling with what's going on. We're trying to understand exactly how we can navigate it and what steps we can take ourselves individually, but how we can also contribute to the world around us. And today, I think this discussion is opened up a doorway into a different way of looking at what we're experiencing. So really appreciate that, Paul, and thank you so much for all the work that you're bringing out into the world.
My pleasure. Thank you for sharing your love and, doing your best with your podcast to help educate and awaken people. And this is a perfect example of exactly what I'm saying. We don't have to make it arduous and stressful if we each do what we love to do with the intention of integration and supporting each other.
Absolutely. Damn right it can. Long may it be that way. Thanks, brother.
That was one of the most far-ranging and soul-stretching conversations we've had on this show in some time. Paul reminds us that pain isn't the enemy, it's the invitation. An invitation to wake up, to clean up, grow up, and to show up. If you resonated with Paul's ideas, then I recommend check out his work. You can find his mentorship platform at myspiritgym.com and his world-renowned teaching hub at chekinstitute.com. And don't forget, this weekend, I'm heading to the Health Optimization Summit in London. That's the 13th and 14th of September. And I'd love to see you there. It's a gathering of some of the world's leading minds in functional medicine, biohacking, ancestral health, longevity, and human performance, all under one roof for 2 days of learning, connection, and transformation. You have the chance to discover the protocols, strategies, and mindset shifts used by over 35 world-class speakers, including Barbara O'Neill, Dr. Josh Axe, Dr. Vonda Wright, and Gary Brecker, and many, many more. And as a listener of this show, you can use the discount code ELEVATE to get 10% off your ticket. So just head to weareelevate.org/health summit or click the link in the description to grab your tickets. Until next time, my name is Astin-Gregory. Live free and prosper.